Hello everyone, my name is Jonathan Griffith. I'm the Graduate Assistant Athletic Trainer for the Jacksonville State Baseball team, and I'm a member of the graduating 2019 class of the Jacksonville State Sports Management Program. Today, we're going to be talking about the timing and distribution of protein ingestion during prolonged recovery from resistance exercises and how it alters myofibroprotein synthesis. The article was by Areta et al., who was done in 2013. Alright, so we've got a problem here. If you've looked online, like I'm sure we all have recently, you can find hundreds of studies examining the effects of how the muscles in your body synthesize protein following resistance exercise. However, if you look closely, almost all of these studies take place in a 4 to 6 hour window. Anyone who's ever worked out can honestly tell you that muscle soreness, muscle rebuilding, all of that takes place much longer than 4 to 6 hours. Delayed onset muscle soreness is a thing because typically the prime time for building muscle and recovery takes 24 to 48 hours. Now, this gap in the research could provide a huge boost to how we understand the body and how we absorb protein, specifically how muscles synthesize protein and how to do it most efficiently. Now, if you're friends with bodybuilders, they'll tell you there's an anabolic window. Now, what we know about the anabolic window has been built on years and years of hard hands-on experience, mainly from bodybuilders, sometimes from scientists and nutritionists. It's generally accepted that in order to build muscle while weight training, you have a certain window, anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes post-exercise, in which you needed to consume protein in order to build muscle. Weight training breaks down muscle by creating small micro tears in the tissue. In order to build this back up and increase mass and strength, your body has to fill in these tears and holes and help you recover. If you know these said bodybuilders, they may look a little something like this. So before science really caught up with kind of the hands-on, hard-working individuals testing this process, it was thought if you missed your anabolic window, you basically wasted your workout. You put all that work in and you missed your time to add protein back into your system to effectively repair muscle. Now, if you've ever been sore, you kind of understand this is bogus. It takes days, sometimes even a full week after certain exercises. After years of extensive research, many people found that there is indeed some truth to the anabolic window. Exercise has been proven to enhance skeletal muscle protein synthesis. Feeding directly following exercise often relates in a net positive protein balance, specifically in skeletal muscle. Also in 2013, there were some studies that were even able to prove that the window was as long as 45 minutes and not much more, stating carbs and proteins ingested directly following exercise create an almost immediate anabolic shift within the affected tissues and overall body. Maybe these guys really aren't so crazy. Pictured here is 4-time world's strongest man Brian Shaw. He's primed to set a new world record deadlift this month at the Arnold Classic in Ohio. He has a full-time nutritionist on staff who's ready to call at the push of a button to dial in Brian's workout and make sure he's getting all the protein, carbs, and fat that he needs in order to set world records and lift heavy things. So we get it. We know the anabolic window. As stated earlier, we all know a great deal about the anabolic window and how it can help protein synthesize and muscle recover faster. We still have so much to learn. If we only examine these 45 minutes and 4 to 6 hour mark, what are we really missing? Let's look at some potential impacts. Say you're working with an elderly population. We all know weightlifting exercises helps develop bone growth. If we want to weight train with an adult, that may be tough. They may be really sore for days after. It may be hard for them to build muscle if their diet is poor. We can kind of counteract a poor diet if we know how to time everything effectively so they're taking protein at the right times. We want them constantly building muscle and constantly building themselves up. We can help affect that positively with the right timing. If you wanted to work for professional bodybuilders or were a professional bodybuilder, nutrient timing, protein intake are essential. You can never achieve world's strongest man status or peak performance without some sort of scientific background or help with meals. The field has just gotten too advanced. You need something to help you along, someone to help push you and prep your meals and get all your intake in the right time so you're recovering and building as much as possible. Finally, as a college athletic trainer, Specifically with baseball, I work with players all the time that are looking to gain mass or muscle, specifically pitchers. Velocity and high velocity are the number one predictor of major league success. Being able to put mass and good, healthy, lean muscle mass on an individual can really help them achieve their goals in the major leagues. So protein is good, right? Why don't we just eat it all the time? If we're just constantly eating nothing but protein, we'll have lots of muscle, right? Well, we all know that's not true. It has been proven that consuming 20 to 25 grams of protein immediately following a bout of resistance exercise creates an increase in protein synthesis. Imagine starting a fire. Say you want to start a fire and have it burn all night. If we add logs or protein onto the fire and create a big bundle of sticks and light the fire, it's going to get going pretty good and it's going to burn for quite a while. However, if you leave it be and don't add anything to the fire, it's going to burn out in several hours. If you don't time your protein intake correctly, that's basically what's happening within your muscles after resistance exercise. You go and work out, so you set the foundation for the fire. You add protein or logs and gas to the fire. Once you light it, your muscles begin to heal. Well, if you only take care of them for 4 to 6 hours, it's going to burn out and they're going to feel bad. We want to avoid that as much as possible. By adding more protein to the available amino acids, we can stoke the flames for continual synthesis and growth. So what's the best way to achieve this growth? Do we just eat protein all the time throughout the day? Do we eat it in large chunks? What's the plan going forward? Well, that's what these people set out to discover. They had 24 male applicants who had at least 2 full years of weightlifting experience, so they were going at least twice a week, preferably more. They were all scanned for body comp in an identical fashion, as well as tested using a 1RM or 1 repetition max protocol to determine double leg extension. Each participant was then placed on an identical meal plan, including fasting to ensure as little error as possible going into the test. So each participant was required to undergo a similar exercise prescription based on their 1RM test. Basically, they found their max leg extension and then prescribed 70 to 80% of their max weight over a certain number of sets and reps. That way they all received a proportional amount of work for their baseline strength. In 12 hours following this test, each subject was placed into a protein intake group sorted by body composition, ensuring all groups stood on an equal footing. Muscle biopsies were taken repeatedly from the vastus lateralis, or your outer quad muscle, on alternating sides. Every group took a minimum of 80 grams of protein over the resulting 12 hours. Biopsies were repeatedly conducted to determine which group experienced the greatest amount of protein synthesis. So, this is how the groups were organized. You had 3 groups of 8 individuals apiece. Unfortunately, one person in the intermediate group had to be excluded from the study for incorrectly taking protein. So the bolus group, they took 40 grams of protein every 6 hours, meaning their intake came in 2 large chunks. All the groups consumed their protein in shakes. That way they got good, high-quality protein. It was just a standard over-the-counter whey protein available to anyone looking to weight train. The intermediate group consumed 20 grams of protein every 3 hours, meaning they received 4 overall doses. Finally, the pulse group received 10 grams of protein every 1.5 hours, resulting in 8 overall doses. So, after all the research was conducted and all the biopsies were taken, the researchers were able to determine insulin availability, amino acid response, myofibril fractional synthetic rate, and several other key factors related to muscle growth. For more information and specifics on how they reached all these things and the equations they used, the link to the video is right there. So this is what all they found. Depending on your desired goals, the findings can be used to reach different conclusions. The bolus group saw a higher overall amino acid availability and created a peak in insulin production not reached by any other group. Meaning every time they took the bolus, all these available factors spiked very high, which is to be expected. They took a lot of protein. The intermediate group saw a higher average of all measurable outcomes for an extended period of time. Meaning if you were starting a fire, they started a fire decently hot and kept it burning the same temperature all day. The pulse group had the lowest overall measurements at any point in time, likely demonstrating unused potential when trying to improve recovery. You really wouldn't want to use the pulse method under any circumstance. So, if you haven't heard, we're all boarding the gain train. So, what does this study definitively prove? Well, based on the last slide, several different things. But we can definitely use it to say one or two things right here. The anabolic window definitely does exist. That was never in dispute. However, we can definitely improve upon recovery up to 12, 24, and even 48 hours post-exercise. The first 45 minutes are extremely crucial. No one will ever doubt that. It's been proven, people have been doing it forever. But what definitely needs more study and more research, and has been proven in this one article, the next 11 hours are no joke either. You can't just push those aside and not use them. Continuing on, the bolus group saw the highest overall rate of protein synthesis. This, in professional bodybuilders and highly trained athletes, may prove beneficial in stimulating rapid muscle growth and hypertrophy. Highly trained individuals that have a very, very, very high baseline strength really only need to train 1 to 2 times per week, which is mainly why that group was selected for the overall study. If you're only training twice per week, the bolus group is easily your best bet. It's going to offer the most bang for your buck as far as protein synthesis is concerned, meaning your muscle gets the optimum recovery over the next 12 hours. The intermediate group saw the highest average rate of protein synthesis and amino acid production and availability. This could prove useful in elderly or untrained populations to stimulate muscle growth rapidly throughout the day. If you're new to exercise and you're training multiple times per week, you need to be taking steady doses of protein every 3 hours. This is clearly going to give you the best overall result and the highest average protein synthesis. The pulse group, like we said earlier, reacted very poorly across the board, particularly with insulin development, suggesting that were this method to work, you'd have to have some sort of carbohydrate intake as well. The protein alone over that pulse period really isn't going to do you any good. So let's continue on and look at some more cases where this might be useful. Say you're a physical therapist working in an elderly population and your patient has ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. You're going to obviously prescribe some sort of treatment and resistance exercise to help delay the effects of ALS. ALS is going to tear down your muscle. It's just going to make you weak and slowly burn up all the skeletal muscle in your body. You want to prescribe resistance exercise to combat that, to try to give them a long, healthy, strong life as you possibly can. So what I might recommend, you've got the intermediate and bolus groups combined, should give you a pretty good nutrient supplement throughout the day to keep yourself burning. You know, your muscles constantly tearing yourself down, so you want to help it grow with resistance exercise and protein intake. The bolus will help stimulate heavy amino acid availability and muscle production immediately after working. And then intermediate protein intake throughout the rest of the day will help keep the fire burning and help counteract those negative effects of ALS throughout the day. So here's my real world application. I work with a college baseball team day in and day out. They're obviously well-trained athletes. And specifically right now in the spring, we're trying to recover as well as we possibly can between games. We play 56 college baseball games in a season if we don't make the conference or postseason tournament. That's a lot of baseball games. That's a lot of wear and tear on these guys. We'll have some people that play probably 48, 50, even 56 games. We have to help them learn how to recover better going into each game, or we're going to risk injury. Once we're injured, my job gets a lot busier, and I'm not a huge fan of that. So we try to keep them healthy from the start. We're playing at least 4 games, sometimes 5 games every week, mandating recovery take place overnight while sleeping. It's really hard to set aside 4 or 5 hours for an active recovery when you're playing for 4 hours and warming up for 3 every day. Again, we're going to use the bolus and intermediate groups, but kind of play off them a little differently. Following a game, the intermediate group is what we're going to go with. We want to sustain and stimulate protein synthesis immediately after, right? We want to get him building protein, getting good nutrients back in his body. When he goes to sleep, that's the optimum time for muscle repair. So in that time, right before bed, we're going to take the bolus group. We're going to go with a large chunk of protein to stimulate and create that peak protein synthesis to allow him to recover better overnight. That is the research article in a nutshell. Obviously, these applications can be used in dozens of different ways. You know, depending on who you're training, how you're training them, how often, there are so many factors that go into this. And honestly, as a research study, I'd love to see even more of this kind of work done over an extended amount of time. It's hard to really say, like, we trained this one day and saw this amino acid and protein synthesis response. How often do people train one day a week? How often do we all synchronize our diets exactly to how we want them? This is the type of study that could really benefit from being done multiple times over and over and over again on different populations and people with different diets, and playing and tweaking with all the variables. Now that we kind of have a basic baseline understanding, you could really have fun and learn a whole lot from tinkering with this. Playing with nutrient timing and delayed intake and prolonged recovery. That's where my entire field is really going. Is just how do we get athletes, particularly in my field with athletes, how do we get them to recover faster, recover better, and come back stronger, better than ever? This is just a small step along the way. We're clearly moving in the right direction, and let's hope we get some more awesome studies like this one. Thank you.